Hey there friends, how's it going? This is not a conventional video essay, but it is a demo, and if you're interested at all in using masking as a tool in your own video editing, I would strongly recommend that you stick around. So first, what is masking? Masking is when you cut around some elements in a clip so that some parts of that clip are visible and others are hidden. As I like to say as an AMV editor, masking is what lets a character from one anime walk into a completely different anime scene. Now, for settings, I would recommend that you feather the edges of your mask a little bit. I used to believe that if you're really precise with your anchor points, then you don't need to feather the edges. But this is not true, as the border can look jagged or just too stark. Now, I'd recommend at least 5 pixels of feather in After Effects. Sony Vegas uses percentages in its feathering, so I'd recommend 1% in Vegas. If you complete a mask and then realize that the edges are too tight or too loose, which is to say too far from the outline and thus, include parts of the background, I would recommend that you use feather out or feather in Vegas to kind of push the mask out or in a little bit. In After Effects, you can do this by adjusting the mask expansion. When masking a translucent object, you might want to make the mask layer partly translucent as well, so that you can kind of see through it. Similarly, when you're going around the edges of an object that is indistinct or out of focus, those edges are going to be a little fuzzier, and you might want to increase the feathering. As opposed to, say, 5 pixels of feather in After Effects, you might want to go 10, 15, something like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that editing software by default will set the mask keyframes to smoothly try and go from one into the other, but you probably don't want that if you're editing anime, so I would recommend that you select the hold keyframe options just about every time, which in the case of After Effects is right-clicking on the keyframe and selecting toggle hold keyframes in the dropdown. As far as how masks are used, masking transitions are one of my personal favorite uses for masking. They're very visually impressive, and they create this great sense of visual cohesion within an AMV. Strategies for masking a transition would include sliding a character on screen and then fading in the background behind them, which requires masking the character out of the scene so they can enter without the rest of the clip, or having a character or object move across the screen, revealing a new clip behind them as they pass. And you can see an example on screen here where Ragyo Kiryuin from Kill la Kill walks across the screen, bringing a new scene in with her. Another use of masking is for overlays or for compositing. So when a character has been masked in or an object that's been masked in remains on screen, you can kind of present them as if they are part of a scene that they're not from, right? So my good friend, Commander John Crichton, did a Redline AMV that makes this heavy use of masked interface elements, presenting Redline as if it were a video game. And in order to do this, they have taken every bar, every piece of text, every notification from the game Burnout, and have then gone in and, overlaid that, after cutting them out, have put them onto the Redline video. I've done some similar things with interface elements in the AMV Made Shadow Legends, but in addition to that, I've also put this silly-looking flower bouquet in the Steins Gate clip from that same AMV, so it's not just interface elements. You can create something that looks very out of place for the sake of comedy, or you can do something, that looks a little more in place, like these characters from Higurashi and Mirai Nikki that I've kind of put, together in a scene. Now, there are a lot of really stellar AMVs that will also separate characters from their backgrounds in order to kind of put them in front of a sea of stars, in front of realistic skies, or even real-world locations. I haven't gone too hard with this, although frequently in my AMV Kotomini D&D club, I had to put all of the characters in a dungeon, and so what's interesting is that a lot of the source clips from Kotomini D&D club do not feature the dungeon backgrounds. I've, taken maybe 4 dungeon backgrounds from the anime and reused them, which you'll begin to notice if you rewatch through with that in mind. And then finally, if you wanted to do something like making a character seem to glitch out, or give them kind of a shadow or a glow, or color them just differently, you can do this by creating a second copy of that video track, masking out that character, and then applying effects to the tracks separately, so you can effectively use masking to selectively apply effects if you want to. But with that overview out of the way, let's get into how to mask on a practical level. So this is going to be a demo of masking. This masking demo will specifically be for a masking transition. Kyon from the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya reaches on screen and shoves aside a computer monitor that's showing pictures of Mikuru. But instead, I want to use this to transition out of a fairy tale scene. So I'll have his arm appear and shove the existing clip away, as if it was on the monitor. Let's get started. I'm going to do my masking in After Effects instead of Premiere. This has some advantages and some disadvantages, but it's my preference since you can have multiple mask tracks per clip. I'll scrub through the original clip to show what that looks like. I'll trim the start of the clip as well, so the first frame is the first frame where Kion's hand appears. Now I'll make sure that my clip is selected by clicking it on the bottom left, and then I'll press G on my keyboard. You can also click the pen tool to start placing keyframes. You'll see them start appearing in a line. Complete the loop, and everything except for his hand disappears. But when we roll the clip forward, you'll notice his hand moves, but the outline doesn't. So we'll repeat the process and start drawing a new outline. We'll need to do this every time to make sure the thing we're masking moves. Once the second outline is complete, we can copy the new keyframe in Mask 2 to the Mask 1 timeline. So we do this by selecting the keyframe in Mask 2, hit Ctrl-C on our keyboard, and then select Mask 1, hit Ctrl-V. Then we click the Mask 2 timeline and press Delete or Backspace. This is the downside of masking in After Effects. It always wants to create a new mask layer every time you start fresh with a mask. Repeat the masking process for a few more frames, and now for the computer monitor. Now, I could do another positive mask and select the parts of the monitor frame and the scene behind that I want to include, but this is a great chance to show off a negative mask, a mask where we select the things we want to make disappear. So we'll just select the inside of the monitor and then hit Subtract in the drop-down on the left for that mask timeline. Then, we're going to have to change the order of the masks so that it adds in the arm after we subtract the monitor contents. I'll flip those around here. And now that we return to Premiere, everything seems to be a frame off. Sometimes editing software does this, possibly due to a frame rate issue with the source video, possibly due to miscommunication with After Effects. When editing in Premiere and After Effects, though, Premiere is going to be our source of truth. I'll just go ahead and shift everything over by one frame. And you can see me doing that here. Also, while we're doing so, let's add that 5-pixel feather we talked about. I'll change the position and rotation of our fairy tale clip frame by frame so that it matches the motion of the monitor to give that impression again that it's being pushed off screen. And I'll have to zoom in a little to keep us from seeing, around and behind the clip. So just like that, we have our first masking transition. Again, this is a transition, but the same principles apply if you want to mask something that stays on screen, the main difference just being that you keep it on screen and manipulate it there, as opposed to having it enter or exit. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Winterblade AMVs with a video masking tutorial. And until I talk to you next, take care.